Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Daniel. So, my name is Beth Andes, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you here to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. If you thought you were on the flight to Phoenix, sorry, gate 12. All right, so I was asked to clarify our summer experiment with time. Today, our service is at 11:15. Congratulations, those of you, unlike me, who didn't show up an hour early. And next Sunday, which is the 16th, 16th, will also be at 11:15. Okay? And then the following Sunday, all right, you with me so far? The following Sunday, we're going to start at 10:30. Then beginning the first Sunday in July, we will have Religious Odyssey starting at 9:15, followed by the service at 10:30, okay? And that will be our summer schedule for the months of July and August. Hopefully, everybody has got that. And I do want to welcome everyone who's here today. I also want to welcome those who've joined us on the internet, live streaming. And all right, thank you.
Good morning, and I'm just checking. Okay, and welcome, friends and members and visitors and guests. Welcome, seekers and doubters. This is a place of more questions than certainties. Welcome to those who struggle and are not yet what they hope to be. This is a place of encouragement, not judgment. Welcome to those who long for beauty, mercy, and hope. This is a place of celebration and affirmation of life. Welcome to those in search of a better world. This is a place where we build together toward a vision of the earth made fair and all its people one in justice and freedom. This week we have passed an historic milestone. It has now been a few days more than 100 years since the Congress of these United States passed the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, granting women throughout the nation the right to participate as full citizens in the elective process by voting. Yay! That would be, can I get an amen? And it would be 14 more months before the required number of states ratified the amendment and it became law, and another 4 months before November of 1920, the first national election in which all women were legally eligible to vote. I wish I felt more confident than I do that if this question were under consideration today, the current Congress would be as affirming of the equality of women as their counterparts of the last century. This is the difficulty inherent in democracy, that the self-interests of those already in power or of an irresponsible majority may be imposed upon those not regarded as having a legitimate voice. The eternal vigilance that we are told is the price of liberty is not just against external enemies, although we do also remember with honor this week the veterans of the D-Day invasion of Normandy 75 years ago, whose courage and sacrifice helped bring an end to the Nazi terror in Europe. But we must be vigilant too against the inner enemies, the inertia of accumulated wealth and concentrated power that always seeks its own perpetuation, and the failure of conscience that would hold some people of lesser worth, misappropriating their resources, despising their pain, silencing their protest, denying their equality and their rights. The greatest spiritual teachers throughout the ages have all agreed that it is not enough merely to avoid wrongdoing in one's own life. We are called into community, to care for one another, to bring our individual gifts into the commonwealth of humanity, and to ensure the justice of our collective ways. Here, in the covenant of memory and promise that draws us together at this hour, we kindle once again the flame that is the sign of our hope and our purpose, that together we shall build a joyful, just, and generous world, beginning here, now, with one another.
Good morning. My name is
morning.
Parker, and I light this chalice to the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Thank you, Parker. Now let's rise as you're willing and able and join in speaking together the words of our covenant promise to one another. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. All right, we're going to try again. Would you remain standing for our opening hymn while Parker gives it another shot? Now I'd invite the children to come forward because Reagan has some thoughts she's going to share with us.
All right, is that it? Okay. It's a small audience. Good morning. Some of you probably recognize me, but if you don't, my name is Reagan, and I am Kari, Khalil, Nevi, and Samir's mom. Okay, I just said good morning to greet you. But for the past few days, Kari, Khalil, Nevi, and Samir's dad, whose name is Dawood, and their Umi, or grandma, whose name is Halala, have been telling one another and friends and family, Eid Mubarak. It means happy Eid in the Arabic language. Can you try to say that? Eid Mubarak. Eid Mubarak. Eid Mubarak. Okay. Their dad and Umi are Muslim. That means they follow the religion of Islam. Have any of you heard the words Muslim or Islam before? Yeah? Good. What about the word Ramadan? Yeah? Good. All right. Can anyone who is not my child tell me something they know about Ramadan? Yeah? Yeah, that's great. He said it's a period of time during which they fast to show respect for Allah, which is the Arabic word for God, and it's the monolithic God, the same one. It's an Abrahamic tradition, so it's the same God from Judaism and Christianity. Well, Ramadan is a month-long religious fast. That means that healthy adult Muslims don't eat or drink anything during daylight hours every day for a whole month. Do you think that would be tough? I do. They wake up extra early when it's still nighttime, say a prayer, eat a lot of food, and drink a lot of water, and then they just have a regular day, only without eating or drinking anything. At the end of the day, Muslim communities often hold an iftar dinner for a lot of family and friends. And when the sun sets, they break fast, which is what iftar means. It literally means breakfast or break fast. And they break fast with fruit, say another prayer, and share a big meal together in community. Why would you think Muslims have this practice of fasting? Any idea? Any idea why it's a religious ritual? Do you guys have some ideas? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. It's actually in the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam. It is written that they are supposed to do this, and it tells how to go about fasting and how to break the fast and which prayers to say. So they get to practice discipline. That means doing what is right when they choose not to eat, especially when people around them are eating. And that way, they know they can make hard decisions to do the right thing when they need to. They reconnect with their faith, their beliefs, during that time of hunger. And they develop empathy for those who experience hunger and thirst when it's not their choice. Zakat, or charity, is practiced particularly during Ramadan. because you have an empathy for people who have less and who are hungry or without homes. After 30 days of Ramadan, of practicing the fast, do you think you'd feel like you might deserve a party? Yeah. Well, after Ramadan, Muslims have a big celebration, but not just one day. It's 3 days of celebrating with food, friends, and gifts. Big celebrations in Islam are called Eids, and this one is called Eid al-Fitr. Can you say Eid al-Fitr?
Eid al-Fitr.
Okay. Well, we just went to a very Kansas City style Eid al-Fitr celebration yesterday. The mosque their dad and Umi go to like to have cookouts and barbecue to celebrate Eids. Yeah, Nefi got henna. We got to see friends, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and elders from the mosque. People exchanged gifts, and we got to have all kinds of yummy barbecue. Chicken, burgers, hot dogs, beans, salads, and watermelon. Now, the Islamic calendar doesn't match up with the one we typically use called the Roman calendar, because the Islamic calendar is based on moon cycles. So Ramadan happens 11 days earlier each year than the last. And I gotta say, this was my favorite Eid al-Fitr celebration because we had a great weather for celebration, and it's the time of year we get ripe watermelon. Okay, do you remember how to say Happy Eid? You can? Yeah, you can say Happy Eid. If you can't remember the Arabic expression Eid Mubarak.
Eid Mubarak.
Yeah, you can say Happy Eid to your Muslim friends and family and neighbors. Okay, so Eid Mubarak.
Eid Mubarak. Isn't this about the longest day possible? When you have the longest day to fast?
That was like 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a very tough time because it was also very, very hot at that time.
In the middle of something.
Yes.
So it'll get easier for a couple of years.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, you guys. We'll now let you go to your classes with song.
Good morning. Hey, I'm Angela Ferguson Allard. I'm a member of this church, and I'm a member of More Squared, the Metropolitan Organization for Racial Economic Equity. If you're a member of this church, you also are a member of More Squared. We have been members since its founding days. We were one of the founding congregations. And I've invited Lon up here today to join me because Lon is the member of this church that has been present at, I think, almost every board meeting that More Squared holds. He has represented your congregation. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are in major fundraising month here for More Squared, and today the offering is going to be shared with More Squared for today and the next 2 Sundays. And we would appreciate your generosity today. I belong to More Squared because I help lead the immigration task force of our work in Kansas and Missouri for More Squared. But I really am fascinated and wished I had time to work on the criminal justice work. They are doing some amazing things on criminal justice in Kansas, particularly in Wyandotte County, on their Medicaid expansion, on better education in our public schools, and the TIF project with the state or city funding for big projects, the workforce development work that More Squared does. It's pretty amazing, and we would encourage you guys, if you want to get involved, we have meetings where we take issues and we turn it into action, and we would love to have your help and your contribution. Now, we're going to show a little video about our upcoming event on Thursday, the 13th, and thank you for your contributions today.
So I'm going to invite the ushers to go ahead and start.
Hey everyone, it's Courtney, and I'm here at the Legendary Jazz Museum, here to talk to you guys about another one of More Square's annual events at the Let's Street 13. We will be honoring 10 legends of our founding congregation. But listen guys, this won't be some boring old service. We'll have live music, good food, and salsa dance, and a keynote speaker that just so happens to be my dad. I got this. Please come out and support More Square. Celebrate with us June 13th at the Let's. Thank you.
Squared banquet before, this is not going to be like it was in the past. Let me tell you, the Lex is the lower exhibition hall of Municipal Auditorium. It's not going to be a sit-down dinner. There will be food and drink available, but there's also going to be salsa dancing, and if you need a free salsa lesson, come on out. Tickets are available today. It closes at the end of this day. We got to turn in the numbers. So come out and buy your tickets. A generous contributor is going to help. With the first 8 people that show up out there, you get a discount on your ticket. So $50 if you're one of the first 8 that get out there. And we'd love to see you out celebrating the work of More Squared. Thank you.
Will you join me in the words of dedication for our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change to a just and compassionate society.
Hi, I'm Marley Murphy. This reading is from The Ideology of Isolation by Rebecca Solnit. She's an author, activist, and a columnist for Harper's Magazine. The modern right may wish that every man were an island, entire unto himself, but no one is wholly independent. You can't survive without taking air into your lungs. You didn't give birth to yourself, did you? Didn't raise yourself. You won't bury yourself. And in between, you won't produce most of the goods and services that you depend on to live. Your gut is full of microorganisms, without which you could not digest all the plants and animals likely grown by someone else on which you rely to survive. No, we are nodes on an intricate system. Synapses snapping on a great collective brain. We are in this together, friends, for better or worse. There is, of course, such a thing as society. You're inside it. Beyond that, beneath it, above it, around and within it, and within us, there is such a thing as ecology. The systems within which our social system exists, and with which it often clashes.
From Connection is a Core Human Need by Brianna Weist. You've probably heard this before in different ways. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. The foremost pillar of happiness is a sense of belonging and purpose. Cultures that are more communal are more mentally healthy as a whole, and people who are alone often die earlier and get sicker before they do. We are a tribal species. There is no way around this, despite what many highly individualistic cultures may want us to believe. No person is an island unto themselves. We are born through connection, and it is through connection to others that we accomplish virtually everything else in life. We do not just prefer healthy relationships, we need them. Most people believe a connection is something they earn by being good enough, when it is really something they develop by being willing enough. If healing is a return to wholeness, then healing from trauma is remembering that we can trust others, we can trust ourselves, and we can trust life. It is the reintegration into easiness, calmness, and the willingness to allow life to be as it is, rather than trying to control how it's perceived. It is not waiting for others to initiate or sustain that connection. It is our own willingness to try again, to be vulnerable again, show up for others, reach out, and make ourselves an active part of our communities and families and friend groups. In the process of restoring a connection with others, we can realize that we actually create a connection with ourselves. In being seen and loved for who we are, how we think, and how we feel, we learn it's okay to be as we are.
Back in the day, they tell me, people used to join churches defensively. I guess there remain communities where this still happens, though not so much in urban centers anymore. But time was when the second or third question folks would ask upon meeting someone new was, And where do you go to church? This inquiry served several purposes. One, it helped sort unfamiliar people into categories. It flushed out Catholics and Jews and unbelievers. Two, if the answer was we haven't found a church home yet, it offered the opportunity for evangelism on behalf of the virtues of one's own congregation. To answer, we don't go to church, was to identify oneself and family as nonconformists, at best to be held slightly suspect, at worst to be ostracized. If you wanted to have a church and be left alone about the subject, you could say we are Unitarian Universalists. And then most folks would say, oh, with a blank look, and drop the subject. Once in a while, they might take the opening by replying, what's that? But usually they didn't really care that much and assumed it was some sort of obscure brand of Protestant, which meant you were more or less okay. These days, it seems like the shoe is on the other foot. The default social assumption in educated white circles, now it's a whole different matter in communities of color for some very good reasons, but that's a subject for another day. The default assumption is that nobody goes to church, except maybe under duress to attend weddings and funerals. And if people who know you not to be a reactionary fundamentalist happen to discover that you do have a church habit, they often wonder, sometimes out loud, why in the world you would do such a thing. You don't have to have a church to defend yourself from rude inquiries. Having a church is more likely to generate rude inquiries. If that has been your experience, this sermon is for you. Because this morning I want to propose that having a church community, complete with theology, community ritual, and personal spiritual practice, is a lot like having a dentist, or a financial manager, or a chiropractor, or a lawyer, or an insurance agent. It's good for you. It contributes to your peace of mind and makes your life better. Not necessarily any and every church, certainly, but this is what makes it worthwhile to sort out the good from the bad. Because a good church is a resource that provides some of the basic building blocks for our human well-being and satisfaction with our lives. Journalist and editor Emily Esfahani Smith did not set out to create an argument about religion, either for or against, in her 2017 book, The Power of Meaning. Rather, she intended to revisit and update the work of Viktor Frankl in his 1946 memoir of his experiences in Nazi concentration camps, Man's Search for Meaning. Esfahani Smith's subtitle, Finding Fulfillment in a World Obsessed with Happiness, suggests her modern journalistic premise. While Frankl's interest was in what psychological qualities enabled some people to survive the atrocities and the intense suffering of the camps, Esfahani Smith seeks to explore how the modern secular quest for happiness is generally unsuccessful, and how the quest for meaning may offer better odds. And yet, it seems to me that every line of her investigations is in effect about the purpose and function of church, properly understood. As in her much-viewed TED Talk, Esfahani Smith cites cross-cultural statistics which suggest that developed and developing nations see increasing rates of suicide. Perhaps as many as 1 million people each year now around the globe end their own lives. A few of these may be motivated by intractable suffering from fatal organic diseases, including undiagnosed or mistreated mental illness. But many more fall into the category of what are now being called the diseases of despair, which also include drug overdoses and chronic fatal alcoholism. Ironically, diseases of despair increase with a culture's economic and technological development, despite that society's rising comforts, opportunities, and resources. The more that the obvious causes of suffering for ordinary people are relieved, the less sense it makes to anyone that they should find themselves unhappy. But the more we expect to be happy and exert ourselves to achieve that elusive state, the easier it is to become despondent and fall into a feeling of hopelessness. According to Esfahani Smith's observation, the people who report the highest levels of happiness and satisfaction in their lives are not those who have ever set out to seek happiness itself. Rather, the people who are the most happy, the most often, are those who are pursuing a sense of meaning in their lives. And the author unpacks that experience as having what she calls 4 main pillars. The first of these is a sense of belonging, and I'll come back to that in a moment in the light of some other research I want to tell you about. The second pillar is purpose. The third is transcendence, and the fourth is storytelling, or what I would call narrative coherence. Each one of these 4 pillars is at the heart of what any competent church is meant to do. These are the functions that religious community ought to be providing for its members, regardless of what theology it represents. This is why church is good for you, because it is helpful to have a committed purpose, a practice of transcendence, a framing narrative, and a sense of belonging in community. None of these is the exclusive province of religion, and none of them is tradition specific. You can find them in Buddhism or in Judaism just as readily as in the more familiar forms of Christianity and in humanism and other non-theistic communities too. Neither are they complex or esoteric ideas. While I do believe that each of them can be explored more and more deeply, they can all be understood simply in the beginning. Purpose is just about having something you want to accomplish, a conviction that there is something for you to do that is continually worthy of your time and energy and commitment. Maybe that is being a good and loving parent to your children. Maybe it is feeding hungry people. Maybe it is creating inspirational art or music. Maybe it is leading a soccer team or discovering a new medicine. Maybe it is protecting endangered animals or growing exotic orchids or advocating for better laws. There are infinitely many purposes, but a purpose is different from a goal. A goal can be achieved, and if it is not connected to a larger, ongoing purpose, the achievement itself can leave us feeling empty and disoriented and vulnerable to despair. Because now what? If your goal is to write and publish a book and you accomplish that, it may feel as if purpose has now evaporated. But if the purpose is, for instance, to educate others about organic farming, then there can always be a new project or goal. Most religious communities have ways of acknowledging that different individuals are good at different things and interested in different things. In his poem titled Church Going, Philip Larkin says that a church is a place where all our compulsions meet, are recognized and robed as destinies. Some traditions speak of our vocations, not just as a matter of religious leadership, but for any purpose that becomes a source of meaning. We go to church, I think, in part to be reminded to take our lives seriously, to reflect about our purposes, and ask both whether they indeed merit our most profound loyalty and to consider whether we indeed give them the investment to which we are called. The best churches, in my view, are not those which try to assign us purpose based on the accidents of our outward identities, but rather those which insistently invite us to name the purpose that calls to us, that gives us joy in its service, and that is worthy of our life's devotion. They summon us to bless the world with that which is unique in us to bestow, and affirm us as we give our energy to that endeavor. The third pillar of meaning is transcendence. This does not have to be about angels or spirit realms or gods, although some people do experience it that way. But at its essence, it is really nothing more than the realization that there is a world beyond the constraints of your own finite personal experience. There are stars millions of light years away. Every solid object we see is composed of a billion dancing atoms. The redwood trees are centuries old. The oceans are 1,000 fathoms deep. Tiny seeds grow into fruit-laden apple trees. Somewhere in the world, a laughing baby has just taken her first steps. On the other side of the globe, a beloved teacher has just crossed the threshold of death. The way we live together could be kinder, safer, more just, more peaceful, more free. All that we know is only the shoreline of all that we might yet learn. The interdependent web connects us to everyone and everything, known and unknown. Our bodies have been shaped by evolution to move to music, to cuddle little kittens, to delight in the sweetness of a peach, to be awed by the view from a mountaintop. The universe is larger and stranger than we know, larger and stranger than we ever can know. Life is a mystery to which the only fitting response is gratitude. Death is a mystery, the token of all that we do not control. This perspective, this level of perception beyond the utilitarian pursuits of everyday and self-interest, is essential to our mental and physical health, to our sense of meaning. Some people find it in nature, others in art, others in the practice of inner quietness, or the poetry of ancient wisdom or timeless ritual, others in the moral equations of kinship and justice. The bottom line is that something somewhere is larger than you, beyond your understanding, more enduring than your brief life, that you can neither exploit nor control. Without that encounter from time to time, our days become impoverished and captive to littleness. When we are not able to see beyond our own petty dissatisfactions, it will be impossible to live centered in a larger meaning. Part of the purpose of church is to help us remember the scale of things and our place in it, the grandeur of a universe that both transcends and informs our unique individuality. As I said, for some people, this takes form as the thought of God, but that is only one of its many representations. The fourth pillar that Emily Esfahani-Smith mentions is what she calls storytelling. Each of our lives is an accumulation of events and choices. The more random they seem to us, the less of a story we have, and the less meaningful our life appears. On the other hand, the more we fit those incidents into a coherent narrative frame, a story with an arc of causation from beginning to middle to now, the more meaning we will find in it. Each of us is the narrator and editor of our own life story, and we can create meaning by taking time to reflect on how the pieces connect together and carry themes from one chapter to the next. At the same time, our individual story is also embedded in a larger sweep of history, and that too can have narrative coherence. It might be the Christian story of salvation, or the Enlightenment story of progress, or the Marxist story of the triumph of the proletariat, or the Nazi story of the victory of the superior race. Not all collective stories are good news, but they all serve to give meaning to those who embrace them. And churches are storytelling bodies. Whether it is the story of Jesus, or the followers of Moses, or the awakening of the Buddha, or the arc of the moral universe bending toward justice, we all have a narrative to offer. Personal narratives about sin and redemption, or achieving enlightenment, or struggling free from oppressive superstitions, as well as collective narratives about the human condition and the beginning and end of the world. We get together to remember those stories and to consider what they mean for our present struggles. Anamnesis, the theologians call it, the intentional act of not forgetting, of keeping the stories alive. Narrative, transcendence, purpose, and of course belonging. Belonging perhaps most of all, as Esfahani-Smith says, the first pillar is belonging. Belonging comes from being in relationships where you're valued for who you are intrinsically and where you value others as well. But some groups and relationships deliver a cheap form of belonging. You're valued for what you believe or for who you hate, not for who you are. True belonging springs from love. It lives in moments among individuals, and it's a choice. You can choose to cultivate belonging with others. Belonging, the most intuitively obvious purpose of a church, a group we choose, where we commit to the practice of valuing others who also choose to belong. Now, as Esfahani-Smith notes, some groups will value people for what they agree to believe together, or for rejecting those who do not choose that group. And we certainly understand that there are, in fact, churches like that. But we don't have to be. We can practice the true belonging that arises from the choice to love. This belonging pillar of the meaning that is foundational to a good life is also affirmed in the work of Johann Hari, author of Chasing the Scream, The First and Last Days of the War on Drugs. Trying to understand the forces that drive both drug addiction and the social and legal responses to it, Hari concludes that addiction is neither a simple moral failure on the part of individual addicts, nor a simple mechanical phenomenon of brain chemistry. Rather, people, and indeed other creatures, as we shall see, become addicted in response to particular kinds of impoverished environments. The opposite of addiction, he proposes, is not sobriety, but connection, or as we might say, belonging. As part of Hari's investigation into the science of addiction, he encountered research performed by a team of biologists at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, led by Professor Bruce Alexander. This team challenged the traditional studies which supposedly showed that drugs such as heroin and cocaine were so physically addictive that laboratory rats, given a choice between plain water and water laced with drugs, would consume the drugged water almost exclusively to the point where they died of overdoses. What Alexander and his team noticed was that these rats were confined to typical metal lab cages, where they had no social interaction with other rats, no mental or physical stimulation, and no opportunity to engage in any normal rat behaviors. So the researchers constructed what they called Rat Park, a large, comfortable enclosure where a community of rats could engage in nesting, play, sex, and all natural social rat behaviors. These rats were also offered supplies of normal water and drugged water, and after sampling the drugged water a time or two, they almost always preferred normal water. None of them consumed enough of the drugs to qualify as addictive, and none of them overdosed. Johann Hari concludes that rats, like people, will bond with addictive substances, drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, and so on, when healthier forms of bonding are not readily available. But if normal social connections are to be had, addiction is rare. Hari cites many other studies and data concerning the human experience of addiction, all of which point to the same bottom line. The most effective antidote is the experience of relational bonding, of belonging. And as Vahani Smith, in her description of this first pillar of meaning, specifies that such belonging happens most reliable when you as an individual reach out for it. We can't bestow it on someone else if we are not seeking it and taking risks for it ourselves, which is exactly what a church community asks from its members. If you want a fulfilling life, don't spend a lot of time pursuing whatever it is that you think makes you happy. Those fleeting moments of happiness are lovely, but they won't sustain you over the long haul. Instead, build meaning. Find your purpose. Tell the story that you are part of. Cultivate an awareness of that transcendence which is larger than yourself and has the power to lift you out of yourself from time to time. Belong to a community that both honors and loves you as you are and believes in your greater potential. All that is precisely what a church is supposed to be for. Although no actual human institution ever gets it perfectly right all the time. But there is no other place that is so specifically for this, that calls us back over and over to the making of meaning in a life well lived. The place that calls us together again and again to remind us that we are not and never have been and never could be in this project alone. So let us proclaim that invitation in song together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. In the words of Rebecca Parker, your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of hands, the reaches of the heart, the gifts of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting. You must answer this question. What will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. The choice to bless the world is more than an act of will or the intention to do good. It is an act of recognition, a confession of surprise, a grateful acknowledgement in the midst of a broken world that unspeakable beauty, grace, and mystery abide. None of us alone can save this world. Together, that is another possibility, waiting.